Alright, hello, Happy New Year. I hope everybody had as restful a holiday season as you possibly could. I am really excited to do this reading. I've been preparing for it for days. I also apologize about this kind of goofy camera angle. I have never filmed cards like this before, and I'm still troubleshooting and probably need to get a different tripod for this, so it'll be weird for a little while, but hopefully it will be a nicer angle soon. Yeah, I'm just gonna shuffle these out and then we'll get started. I might be quiet for now, but yeah. Throw that in there. Okay. All right, let's see. Oh, okay. We have the devil under the deck, if you can see that. They're holographic cards. All right. The star, the tower. Well, okay. 5 of Wands, Hanged Man. 6. This is no, 4 of Wands, Chariot. 5 of Swords. And the World card. Wow. Lots of major arcana. All right, let me just make sure you can see all of these cards in here. Yeah, okay. There's a little bit of glare. All right. Let me just look at this. Mm-hmm. 4 of Swords. And 5 of Swords. Okay. This is interesting. This is really fascinating, actually. I, truth be told, tried to start this reading one other time just before this, using a different deck, a new deck. And I was like, you know what? I actually don't feel like I get a super good connection to these cards right now, so let me use a deck that I'm more familiar with. This is the Moon Power Tarot, by the way. One of my favorite decks. I was actually just about to use a new deck from this creator called the Neptune Power deck, but I need to practice with it a little bit more. So I'm using my Moon Power deck. And it's funny because I got the 5 of Swords and the Hanged Man in the previous spread with that other deck, which I just think is so... Sorry, I have a bit of a runny nose. I'm recovering from a cold. I apologize. But anyway, I got those cards in the previous spread, and I just think that's so interesting that there's sort of a reoccurring thing coming up with both of these, and it actually makes a lot of sense to me. I think I'm gonna jump around a bit rather than like reading it like in order. I think that I'm going to start here and here-ish with this 5 of Wands and Five of Swords, because they're both fives, right? Which is already kind of an interesting thing, because fives represent transformation and change. And we're also kind of getting that with the World card, right? The World represents the ending of a cycle, which makes sense because 2025, the year that we have just completed, numerologically, it was a 9-year. So a really big time of ending cycles. We also have that tower, which connects to Mars and the number 9. Really big closeouts of big themes. We also have this Devil card, which is really instrumental in closing out cycles, of course. I mean, when we're looking at the Devil card, we'll kind of talk about this as we go because there are lots of angles with the Devil. This, of course, talks about patterns that we're still committed to, oftentimes unconsciously, even if there is a level of awareness. Sometimes there are still major parts that we are unaware of. There are certain connective elements that we are missing, right? Let me just make sure I'm recording. Oh my god, I just got scared for. Okay, we're good. Okay. Anyway, there are certain elements that we're missing in terms of the connective tissue of understanding how these Devil card patterns play out. And this is what's kind of tricky about the Devil, is a lot of the time people think that they're aware of certain patterns and they know they need to change them, and it's really bad, and they feel really guilty, or they feel a lot of pressure that they need to fix something. But really, I believe that when it comes to the Devil card, whenever you feel that sense of pressure or fear or this lack of control or this like fear of judgment, either coming from yourself or other people, a lot of the time that is a surefire sign that you're misperceiving whatever it is that you're dealing with here. Because the Devil card isn't really meant to be a card of self-punishment, even though that's how a lot of us experience it. When we get this card, it indicates a lot of the time a cycle or some sort of pattern or behavior that we've been stuck in that has probably been causing us some amount of distress or dysfunction in our life. It's kind of representative of addictive behavior, right? Not necessarily addictions to substances, it could be, but it's just some sort of way of being that we feel really dependent on and we have identified ourselves with. Whether or not there is, truth to that identification, maybe in the past or not, when we get the Devil card, it says, okay, we've gone through these cycles and maybe we are ready to confront them. Maybe we're ready to evolve, shed a skin. But there's still an obstruction here, because when we see the Devil card, it usually indicates that, like I said, there's a strong focus on self-judgment or judgment from other people, or perceived judgment from other people. And this is where a lot of our energy gets focused. I mean, you can kind of see these like flames behind this figure, this Devil figure, right? And I think that is our oftentimes mental, emotional, physiological response to difficult things that we're trying to overcome or trying to understand, that we find deeply confusing and fearful about ourselves. We experience it in this very, very out of control, fiery, frightening, overwhelming way. And I think that vantage point in and of itself is kind of counterproductive, even though it makes sense. It's a totally understandable response. It actually gets in the way of us being able to connect with what the Devil card is intending to help us understand. The Devil card can be met with a lot of compassion. It can be met with a lot of gentleness, a lot of kindness. It can be met sort of like as a friend, similar to, how a lot of people talk about, meeting death as an old friend and the archetype of death. The Devil card can also be met like that. It doesn't need to be this super intense, frightening, out of control type of experience. But we oftentimes experience it that way, right? which again makes total sense, but I just want to kind of invite in, to this reading, this perspective that we can change how we connect to this energy. It doesn't have to be so fearful and so constrained all the time. This can feel kind of restricting sometimes, but it can actually unfold much more gently, kind of like a flower opening up and revealing us to ourselves if we allow it to be received that way. But it's something that we kind of ebb and flow with, right? There are moments where we might be more receptive to working with this energy that way, and other moments where it will feel much more overwhelming and frightening. And that's part of life, right? That's part of just figuring out how these things work for us and how we can learn from them, and how it actually feels to be a human being embodying these archetypes, these journeys. So point being, it's okay, whatever stage you're in. If you're having a more challenging time with certain patterns closing out and new beginnings, or if you're really feeling this sense of urgency, like wanting things to move faster, but it's not happening. Wanting things to move faster and it's not happening. Yeah, that makes sense, and there's sort of a reason for that. It's funny because, yeah, we've got this Hanged Man, we've got this Four of Swords right next to this Chariot, this Five of Wands. There's definitely like this tension for sure. Well, I have been feeling this in my own life, this want for things to move already, especially because we've been in some pretty intense Piscean energies for a few years now. We've been in a longer, of course, Neptune and Pisces transit since about 2011, 2012. We're finishing up the last few months of that Neptune and Pisces transit, moving into Neptune and Aries. Last few months of Saturn in Pisces, last 6 months of North Node in Pisces, with a lot of energy this year moving into air and fire signs, especially Aries. And there's this want for things to happen because we've been in this this Hanged Man energy for sure. I've been thinking about this energy a lot, and I think I'm gonna make a separate video talking about the Hanged Man specifically, and maybe in relation to the Hermit card, since we're in that Pisces Virgo axis anyway. But the Hanged Man, is a beautiful but can be very frustrating energy, because there's something about the Hanged Man it's not like necessarily a trickster energy by any means, but it's an energy that I think when you're in it, oftentimes it can feel sort of like your life is making fun of you, because you really want to make something happen, whether it's because you have some actual aspiration or because you're anxious and afraid, and feel like, oh no, I should be further along. I want to be doing this, that, and the other, and I feel really bad because I feel so tired all the time, or I'm so scattered and I can never get anything done. Again, with the self-judgment, maybe that's part of what this Devil card represents as well, is, look, Two of Swords under the deck as well underneath. Maybe there's a level of this, an aspect of this Devil card that represents a certain perception of yourself and your productivity, your energy levels, how fast things are able to move, and what you think you should be able to get done in a certain amount of time versus what is actually reasonable and sustainable, could be. But the Hanged Man, when it shows up, it's oftentimes telling us that we are perceiving something either incorrectly or incompletely, and we're trying to take action based on that incomplete or incorrect assumption. And for our own good, actually, we're going to be stalled for a little bit, and as this card suggests, kind of hung upside down, which is trippy and deeply uncomfortable. Okay, not only are you being kept still when maybe you don't want to be, when maybe you have a lot of anxious energy, a lot of it just want to move, want to take action, but you're also being flipped, upside down, and you're dealing with a blood rush, right? Rushing to your head, and you're probably kind of pissed off. I am sometimes working with this energy. It's like, this is awful. This like feels really disorienting. I'm really mad. I don't want to be here right now. But it's kind of a relentless energy. This is the wisdom of the Hanged Man, because it doesn't really let up until you allow this really deep internal process to shift something within you. And because it's a watery energy, there is this really strong like emotional, intuitive component to it, right? This card is similar to the Temperance card to me, even though they're ultimately very different, energies, and they work differently. There's something about both, though, where there's like this like really deep need for an internal shift and a lot of stillness in relation to that, because you can't really understand or integrate anything that both the Hanged Man and the Temperance card are trying to show you if you're running around trying to do too much too soon. So there's sort of a feeling of like you're forced into stillness with this Four of Swords as well, so that you can integrate something and come into more of a place of balance, so that when you move, right, and we certainly get this indication that that will happen because we've got this world right at the end of the spread and this Chariot. When you move, you want it to be stable and you want it to be sustainable, right? There's no point in like taking a bunch of action if everything's going to crash and burn every 5 seconds that you try to do something, which is what ends up happening when we're disconnected from this energy. But the Hanged Man comes in and really helps us anchor into the things that really matter, the things that we can become very distracted from, especially when we're, again, dealing with these kinds of energies, these fears and these anxieties, societal expectations, family expectations, your own expectations. When we're consumed by that, we tend to ignore the sustenance that lives within us, that is the most clear directive and the only thing that's necessary. But with this Five of Wands here, of course, there's a bit of a tension. Like, there's a bit of a like, I don't want to do that. Like, of course, makes sense, right? It's a totally normal response to like going through this type of process, and we can make space for that. But really, here we're getting this strong message of like, the more you take the time to be still, the more you take the time to listen and to rest and really pay attention to what's happening within you and how that's also showing up externally, you're going to have a much smoother time, moving into these new cycles. And the more that you rest now, the more that you embrace the stillness now, the faster you'll be able to move when you're meant to move. You'll have less obstacles in your way and less, you'll feel less disoriented because you've allowed things to move around and shift and settle in you during this preparation period, during this stillness period. So you won't have to do as much of that later, And with this Five of Swords, this is a really interesting energy, because on the one hand, this Five of Swords is a shift in beliefs, a shift in certain ideas that you hold about yourself, about the world. It's a change in your sense of identity, in your conscious sense of identity, and also how you're communicating that to other people, right? But there's also, I think this image is really interesting, like with the swords kind of piercing through, like coming out of her head, her crown. Five of Swords is like a really great thing. There's the 5 here with the 5 of Wands as well, right? There's sort of this like liminal thing with the 5 because it's in between the numbers. It's like smack in the middle. And so it's sort of like a blended state from where we start and where we're ending. It's in neither. But it's a really important like middle place, a transitional place. And oftentimes liminal spaces, while being kind of uncomfortable and trippy and having their own, feelings of instability sometimes, they're the most, what's the word? Like, you're the most porous in a way. You're open in a way. It's kind of like the dream state, where there are new insights coming in, especially because we have this like double card. There are new ways of connecting, to like where you've been and what you've thought about certain things that are going to make all the difference. And that's kind of where like the World card comes in, is not only are you like going to be able to, start a new cycle and do whatever it is that you want to do, but it's a change that really exists from within first, where your whole relationship with yourself, your perspective on things has been totally transformed. And that's the thing that really matters, it's not actually the external circumstances that really make the difference here. Not that that doesn't matter. But what's really going to be fulfilling, what's really going to sustain you and ultimately be your most valuable directive, is the fact that you're just going to have a better understanding of yourself, of where you've been, how you used to define these things, your sense of control, around what this was supposed to mean, how you're supposed to respond to it. There's just like potential for clarity. And this is throughout the year, of course. Like, this isn't going to happen quickly. Like I said, especially with this Devil card, it's all an ebb and flow. There will be moments where it'll be easier to connect and to have compassion and to feel gentle. And there will be other moments where you're going to be like, fuck this. And that's okay. But ultimately, there will be, over the course of the year, a change that occurs within. And these cards, the 5 of Wands and 5 of Swords, the tension that we experience, I mean, look at this. We see this, like, this interesting depiction of, like, the face at 2 different angles at the same time. I mean, yeah, like, that's literally it. Like, I find that the 5 energies can, feel quite uncomfortable. There's a lot of tension that comes with them. And it's funny because, like, in myself, I tend to judge these energies a lot, especially 5 of Wands. Whenever I'm experiencing a 5 of Wands energy, I tend to feel a lot of like, oh no, I'm not supposed to be feeling this kind of combativeness. Like, here I am, I'm creating tension. I should just be more receptive to this. I should just be more open. It's fine. It's not a big deal. But actually, like, that dialogue is kind of useless, because if you're experiencing tension, it's for a reason. It's actually not something that you need to diagnose, as if it's a sign that you're somehow missing the point or lost or being like immature or something. If you're frustrated, if you are frustrated, there's probably a good reason for why you're frustrated, and the much more valuable kind, again, compassionate with this Devil card energy. The much more compassionate thing to do is to say, okay, I'm frustrated about something. I might not entirely understand why, because maybe I've never allowed myself to ask that. Maybe when I was like a kid, or when I was a young adult, or whatever, I was in environments where my sense of frustration was belittled. It was treated as something irritating, and therefore I never developed the language and the ability to perceive the fact that there's actually a wealth of valuable information that comes with frustration, and that when I engage and ask myself the necessary questions to get to the bottom of that, I'm actually building a bridge that makes this sense of frustration seem like less of a problem to me from my own perspective. And it feels less out of control, it feels less overwhelming, less irritating, and you won't put as much weight and as much meaning, on this part of your experience, while still being able to value what it represents. It won't feel like you're doing something wrong for having the occasional moment of being annoyed and not being able to receive something as easily as you think you should be able to. Even if it's something that you want, by the way, even if it's a change that you're excited for, because that's also something here. Like when you're moving into these new cycles, sometimes receiving the things that you want is actually quite frightening and quite confronting, and can bring up its own set of frustrations that you weren't expecting. You can be like, wait, I thought I wanted this, I thought I was ready, and now I just feel really uncomfortable and afraid of everything, and I want to go back, but you can't. That can also be coming up this year, and when that happens, sometimes we kind of want to jump back into doing things the way that we used to, and that's kind of where this Two of Swords is self-inflicted blindness, right? Pretending that you don't know something that you do know, pretending that you don't have information that you do have, refusing to make a choice when it's maybe kind of clear where it is that you want to be going. And so, there's just something about trying to make space for all of those feelings, because this is quite overwhelming. The shift from an end into a new beginning it can bring up a lot of grief, actually. And even when you're in the more beginning stage rather than the ending stage, because they're kind of one and the same, of course, it can be sad, it can be lonely even. Sometimes you can feel kind of isolated in your feelings because people around you can just be excited and just be like, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to do all this stuff, I'm looking forward to this, that, and the other, and you might still need a moment to kind of just sit with what was and sit with the life that you might be leaving behind. Or there might just be things that are changing form, you're changing form, and you might need a moment to just feel a sense of connection and gratitude with what came before and who you were, who you've been in the very recent past, maybe in the distant past. There's a lot of, emotional recall that can come up with the Hanged Man as well, insights into past cycles, and how they might still be, the ripple effects, you can still be feeling connected to things that happened to you before, versions of yourself from before. Sometimes you can feel, just who you were when you were 16 or 7 or 21 or whatever. You can feel so connected to the center of those people, the essence of those versions of you. And I find that sometimes during transitional moments, you can feel that the most. You can feel so connected to parts of you from other transitional moments in your life where maybe you never really got to fully process that liminal space, and there was a part of your grief and your discomfort that you got cut off from, perhaps, because you just needed to adapt to a new situation, and you just had to move. And maybe there's sort of residual loss that you're sitting with, and that's also fine. When we're looking at this Star card and Tower combination, this is really fascinating to me. I don't think I've ever pulled these cards like as a pair before, and I've never really thought about their energy combination together, but it's quite interesting. It's fascinating, you know, as well, because this Tower energy was quite the dominant energy of last year. 2025 was sorry, 2025 was a number 9 year. So definitely ending of a cycle, right? And number 9 rules Mars, and this is Mars card, the Tower. And this year is a 1 year ruled by the Sun, and over the summer we will be shifting from that Pisces Virgo node into an Aquarius and Leo node. So this star card, and you know, with the Pluto and Aquarius, which happened, I think that transit happened 2 years ago, I believe, in 2024. And there's this very new energy that's possible, right? It's funny how like these are the cards that open the reading, but I kind of needed to like go through all of this first, because these energies are so big, so powerful, so strong, so intense that they're almost blinding, you know? And like when you're like navigating this and experiencing this combination, it's really easy to get thrown off track. And like underneath the surface, and when I say thrown off track, I mean thrown off track of paying attention to your own body and your own feelings, you know, your own emotions and everything. Oh yes, this is why, right? Okay, this actually makes a lot of sense. When you're in such powerful big energies, ending cycles, and is a ripe time for like all of this old, scary, familiar patterning to come in. You know, this like, oh my god, I don't know what I'm doing. This is crazy. This is ridiculous. I'm gonna crash and burn. None of this is gonna work. I'm so stupid for even thinking that this is gonna be possible. Why did I ever think that? Blah, blah, blah. And like, you've already gone through this entire journey. This is what it is, right? Throughout the course of your life up until now, you've already gone through this entire process of exposing yourself to new things, facing your fears, trying new things. And there are some things, right, where you've confronted your fears and overcome them, stepped into new stages of your life, and it's been wonderful. And then there are other things, other parts of us that take a lot longer, right? A lot longer to address. It takes a lot more gentleness, a lot more time and maturing before we're ready to express something or to try something or share a part of ourselves. And I think what's happening for a lot of people is maybe you're stepping into a new stage that you've never been in before, where you're able to start sharing a part of yourself that you've never, ever been able to share. Whether that's like creative work or you want to learn a new skill, you want to travel, or it's even changes in, again, how you identify. It could be like gender and sexuality related. It could be you're shifting professions into like your lifelong passion. It could be so many things, you know, like things that you just weren't ready yet, and you hadn't built the foundation yet to be able to take action and make something happen. Like I said, we're moving into a lot of air and fire energies this year, so making things happen, taking action is going to be easier. There's going to be a lightness, you know, when we're moving through a lot of earth and water energies. They're very necessary, of course, for like the healing and the understanding and the attuning to the self within, but they can be quite dense and quite intense to move through. It can take a long time and a lot of energy. And so when we move into a lot of air and fire after a period of a lot of earth water, sometimes that like it feels like a breath of fresh air. It's like, oh, finally, you know, things feel a little bit lighter, a little bit easier. There's more warmth, more like excitement and passion, and that's great. But you know, it takes all this time to like build with that earth water combination of trying to understand. And this is Capricorn's card, right? Who better than Capricorn? Okay, I'm so annoyed. My camera, my phone was full and my video cut off right when I got to the good part too, which is so irritating. But And just to close this out, I was talking about the star card and this tower combination, okay? And I think I was saying before the video cut that these are just entirely overwhelming energies, right? And what's really beautiful about the star card is you get all of this like celestial wisdom with this card, right? Similar to Virgo and the Hermit card, where Virgo kind of has this seed of wisdom that is timeless, has just existed for all of these years, you know, all of the ancient people who discovered anything, went through any sort of internal process. Those seeds of wisdom, they produce fruit that produce new seeds, and so really like all seeds are just connected, right, to the original seed, we'll say. And in a similar way, you know, with like a star, when we look at the sky and we get this like celestial wisdom that we associate with the star. The stars are so bright, you know, that in areas, of course, without light pollution, they light up everything. And we can imagine, you know, being up close to the stars. They might even be blinding. But they've also always been there for people who were traveling, right? By sea, by land, people look to the stars to help them navigate. And so many people look to the stars out of a poeticism, like when they're sharing moments with their loved ones, their family, their friends, romantic partners, even by themselves, you know, even when you're on your own. So many people look up to the stars and tell stories, right? They find shapes and constellations in the stars. There's so much beautiful emotion and memory that we find in nature. And, you know, in the most daunting moments of your life, the most blinding, terrifying, overwhelming moments, you will also eventually find these kinds of tender connections. You know, when you look back on, or when you look back on memories that you have with people that you love, and, you know, you can, I think most people probably have a memory of stargazing or trying to find a constellation. And those are such innocent moments, you know, and it's such a great depiction of how, like, you know, a ball of fire, of course, is like quite intense, you know, but it can also be a source of inspiration and a source of, again, gentleness and tenderness that you can find. So even in these new moments that are terrifying, there's also a gentleness that you can find in relation to these big moments. One day you'll look back on the experiences that you're having right now, and you'll probably feel a combination of like, whoa, that was daunting, that was scary, and I remember how much I felt like I was going to shit my pants and I didn't know how I was going to get through that. And you'll certainly feel the magnitude of that, the same way that, you know, we see the magnitude of the night sky when we're looking at it. But you'll also have these sweeter stories and these gentler memories of how you eventually found your place and how you found a connection to things and the meaning that you made. All of that will exist together, you know? All of it will come together. And even with this tower, I love the tower. I know that the tower has quite the reputation. Oh, it looks so beautiful. The tower has quite the reputation. And I understand that. But I also, you know, in a similar vein to this star card, I look at these lightning bolts, and who doesn't feel moved when looking at lightning, you know? Like, it's terrifying, it can kill you, of course. There is something so life and death about it, right? But it is really beautiful. Like, there's something awe-inspiring and very, very human in the same way that all of us have looked at stars, we've all looked at lightning and been like, holy shit, right? And even in these really big moments, these scary moments that feel life or death sometimes, in a way they are, because there's a part of you that's dying. There's a version of your life that's dying and closing. There are these moments, lightning strikes, where you'll get to feel deeply connected to yourself, deeply connected to your humanity, your life, what it means to be connected to nature, what it means to have this experience as a human being, right? It's all a part of the process, and there is a poeticism here that even though in the beginning when you're starting it's scary, you'll find those tender moments as you go. And you'll find reassurance in that. And I pulled these cards because I got to the end of the reading before I realized that my phone didn't have space, unfortunately. I pulled these oracle cards from the Sacred Rebels Oracle by Alana Fairchild and got this very apt Sacred Fool, and on the bottom of the deck, Inner Trust. So apt, right? I had to censor this card, unfortunately, because I don't want YouTube to get me in trouble or whatever. I don't know how it works here. I've never posted tarot readings on the internet before. But I love this depiction of the Fool where she's wearing this jester hat, and I don't know if you can see it super well. Hold on, let me try and pick this up. Can you see that? She's holding a little puppet on strings, and I kind of like that idea because when you're going through such major transformations and change, we can feel really serious all the time, especially, we get this Devil card, of course, right? And I think that it's really important to remember that, even though on the Rider-Waite depiction of the devil, the human beings are chained to the devil, really it can be the other way around. We're you can outsmart these patterns. You know what you're doing here, right? There are moments when you want to be gentle, you want to be compassionate towards this. But there are other moments where you might want to play a game. You might want to remind yourself that really the devil is the puppet on the strings and you're the one pulling the strings. And you're allowed to enjoy that. This is allowed to be fun. You're allowed to make jokes of this when it feels right for you to do that. And the Fool in tarot, of course, is so trusting, so wise in that trust. There is a beautiful kind of breathless abandon in the sense of what could possibly go wrong? And it's not sarcastic. If life is a journey and it's a process and it's an adventure, of course things will go wrong. Of course shit will hit the fan. Of course, you'll get caught in the metaphorical quicksand and maybe drown in a river, or maybe be at risk of eating some poison berries or whatever, getting caught in a natural disaster. All of that is a part of life, and you can't do it wrong, even though it feels like it. Things can feel really rigid and you have to get it right and you have to know what you're doing all the time, but you won't. And I'm getting The Places You'll Go vibes by Dr. Seuss. Inner Trust. That's just a beautiful way to close this. That is, Four of Swords, Hanged Man. You've got this. You're gonna be fine. You know what you're doing, even if it won't always feel like it. It all just comes down to you trying to stay centered in what you already know to be true. You've done enough work, and you're ready for the next step, and you will be fine. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this plays out over the course of the year for me and for the world. I hope this was helpful and interesting to you. I'll be posting more tarot and astrology content in addition to art and literature analysis, and I'm really excited. This is my own kind of new journey after a lot of my own work that I've been doing, so there's evidence of this these cards that play in my life. And yeah, I hope that you have a great year. And thank you for watching.